Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Didi Got a Podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Didi. I appreciate you all for tuning in as always. Listen, I went and dug up and found an interview that our friend, Mr. Ben Shapiro, gave just a couple of days after Charlie Kirk was allegedly taken out on September the 10th. Now, the purpose of me covering this interview in March, several months later, is because what we know now about Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk's relationship, that being they didn't really get along. Charlie didn't really care for him as much. He tried to sabotage Charlie Kirk's career, knowing that Charlie Kirk did not have Ben Shapiro on the guest speaking list at MFest, only to find out that after the fact, he was later added to the lineup of MFest, only for Ben Shapiro to invite himself onto the Charlie Kirk show, pretend as if him and Charlie were super close, and then quote unquote donate $1 million that many of us believe was just his way of buying his way onto the MFest stage. Why is this important? Because in this clip, Ben Shapiro isn't going to say anything super crazy, or at least at the time, it wouldn't have really stood out to anyone because everything was so new, everything was so fresh. People were still trying to figure out what happened, what's going on. Many of us still are. But coming into this thing with a fresh set of eyes, I feel completely different about this interview. So without further ado, hit the like button. We're going to react to this together. I also want to use this time to say I covered the whole controversy surrounding Jim Carrey and if he was cloned, and I gave my thoughts. I did a deep dive into his career. Feel free to check that out when you get a chance. Now, without further ado, let's tap into the interview.
So I didn't realize this was going to be kind of a theme show because we write our editorial before the week starts, and so it was all about freedom of speech. Then the assassination occurred, so this is turning into a theme show. But it is kind of interesting that this guy was shot, and he's been on our show, been on my podcast. I talk to him, I like to him, I like everybody. I talk to everybody. I think I'm glad I took that approach. But he was shot under a banner that said, "Prove me wrong," because he was a debater. And too many people think the way to do that, to prove you wrong, is to just eliminate you from talking altogether.
Just want to stay here for the record. Ben Shapiro is one of those people as well. There are many different ways to eliminate someone outside of unaliving them, right? And Ben Shapiro is a huge advocate of that, but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
So the people who mocked his death or justified it, I think you're gross. I have no use for you. The people who are saying now we're at war, I have no use for you. So my first question, true or false? I think the real war is not between left or right. It's for the people it's between the people on both sides who want a war and the people who don't.
I mean, I think that's accurate. I knew Charlie for 13 years, and when he was a kid, he was like an 18-year-old kid when I first met Charlie.
Well, before we even get into like the way he's speaking about Charlie, so let's just back up here. He just said that he agrees with Bill Maher that it's not about the left versus the right. It's about just people that disagree with each other. Well, that's the opposite of what Ben Shapiro teaches on his show. In fact, as of right now, Ben Shapiro is pushing this idea of war. He's defending Donald Trump's action surrounding the Iran war. And by all means, it is a war. And while simultaneously doing that, Ben Shapiro is pushing the left versus right nonsensical political paradigm when he knows it's much bigger than just Democrats versus Republicans, especially coming from somebody like Ben Shapiro, who's always been a never Trumper. So I don't know why he agreed with that. And I want you to also notice how he starts off with this little smirk, talking about how long he's known Charlie without actually speaking about the nature of their relationship. Which brings me to my next point. It's very odd to me about this interview. Just 2 days after everything happened, why is Ben Shapiro giving an interview about Charlie Kirk as if he was best friends with Charlie Kirk, as if he was good friends with Charlie Kirk? It reminds me in the weirdest way of Bibi Netanyahu. When everything first happened with Charlie, Bibi Netanyahu voluntarily chose to go onto these news networks and put it out there for the record that he had nothing to do with this. The reason why that's important as it pertains to Ben Shapiro is because Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk allegedly didn't get along behind the scenes, wasn't speaking at MFest, only for him to later be added after Charlie was allegedly taken out. And now he's on this campaign tour of defending Erika Kirk from any type of criticism, including the verifiable lies she's been caught in. But I'm going on a rant. Let's continue.
The Breakers in Palm Beach, and he was fundraising, running around, and I watched him, grow into a man and watch him, get married and have a couple of very young kids. And, whatever you thought of Charlie's views is irrelevant. The fact is that what he made his living doing and what he actually did quite well, made himself really good at this, was just going and talking to people on the other side. And that's what he was killed doing. He was literally in the middle of answering a question and picked up the microphone and was shot in the throat. And we do have a serious problem in this country with people who believe that violence is the proper response to speech, and that does skew young. I mean, what the polls tend to show is that of Gen Z, only 58% of Gen Z believes that there is no excuse for violence in response to speech, meaning that 42% believe that there are some times that violence ought to be a response to speech.
So I would never sit here and just state with absolute certainty or state so definitively that Ben Shapiro knows what or who was or could have been behind what happened to Charlie or what allegedly may have happened to Charlie. But immediately after stating that it's not left versus the right, he then resorts to talking about some polls that speak about how some people believe that violence is the answer when you don't agree with the person. When there's ample amount of evidence, and even just 2 days after the fact, there's been all this evidence to state that clearly what happened to Charlie, even at that stage, at the very early stages, at the very least, there were red flags. There were questions in the air. There was a lot of uncertainty. Why is he speaking in this clip as if he knows for certain that it was some radical leftist or some radical person that just disagreed with Charlie? How do you know that that's what was behind the reason Charlie allegedly got shot? You don't. There's no way for you to know that just 2 days after the fact. And this, to me, also adds to the deception of Ben Shapiro, because it almost seems as if he's trying to help paint this narrative. Because if it wasn't the case that he was trying to help paint the narrative, then he could have given this interview, and then after the fact, once more and more lies were being exposed about TPUSA, about the people that were around Charlie, about people's behavior on that day, if Ben Shapiro would have come out just like we have and pointed those things out, then I wouldn't be as skeptical. But that's the opposite of what he's done. He's pretending like he hasn't noticed or seen any of it. And here he is here pushing this idea that some person that disagreed with Charlie, not a foreign nation, not a foreign entity, not some sort of foreign military, or even potentially an inside job. No. Some lone person that disagreed with Charlie, according to the polls, this is most likely what happened to Charlie. Okay.
Which is deeply terrifying. I mean, on a personal level, obviously, I have 24/7 security. I've had 24/7 security for a decade. I've spoken at a lot of college campuses. I never, honest to God, thought that we were going to get to this point. Even the political figures is not the same thing as just being shot in the throat for the crime of debating issues in the public square. And I thought wrong. I thought that that's not what America is or what it should be about. And we've come to someplace incredibly dark in our nation's history. And, I weep for the country. I weep for Charlie.
You weep for Charlie, huh? Ben Shapiro, you don't even believe in free speech. You believe in free speech up until the Israeli government or military is being criticized for their decisions, for their influence on this country, for the double standards in this country, especially as it comes to the laws in Congress. So what is Ben Shapiro here talking about? It's come to a dark time. Yeah, you're part of the reason of that, man. And I also want to state for the record, not for nothing, I know, Candace, a lot of you all listen to Candace, and I know she's given her opinion on Ben Shapiro many times, but that's personal. She worked with the guy. She knows the guy personally. Most of us, none of us really, we don't know him personally. We can only go by what we see and what we hear. And I'm just speaking from an objective perspective. When I look and I listen to Ben Shapiro, and this is well before the past 5 months, Ben Shapiro has always given me snake vibes. He says one thing in front of you, he's saying something else when you're not around. That's the type of energy I get. I get opportunist vibes from him. I get the vibes of somebody who looks for the best way to capitalize or benefit from a person or a situation. And I feel like that could be happening here, which once again leads me to my ultimate question. Why would Ben Shapiro give this interview just 2 days after the fact? Why so soon? Why so fast? As if we don't all remember the interview that you and Charlie had just the day before, 2 days before, where Charlie was venting to you and asking these very sensible questions about Israel and our support for this foreign nation, and you giving him this weird look on camera that everybody saw.
I should also ask a question. Is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question, that maybe we shouldn't believe everything the media says, because I know I've been conditioned to ask a lot more critical questions over the last couple of years. So, Ben, some people would accuse Israel of wanting to ethnically cleanse. Some people in the Israeli government are saying, again, it's all over the place, right? You have opinions all over. In your opinion, what would a good outcome 5 years from now be? And how does one respond to the claims of ethnic cleansing?
To me, it's similar to Bibi Netanyahu. It appears to me that Ben Shapiro was trying to get ahead of the narrative and trying to paint this picture about what happened to Charlie, and it's just like everybody else who's ever been either assassinated or potentially assassinated is because of some political ideology or political ideological differences. When we know that there are much deeper and bigger things that go on in this nation outside of just a person disagreeing with another person. The other reason I believe he could potentially have given this interview was to promote his book, just like the other guy, the off-brand version of Ben Shapiro. Just like every interview he gave, he was promoting his book.
Is the author of this incredible book, which all of you need to order right now. Pause the video, order it, and then continue with the video, called Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West.
We actually did speak for the last time less than 24 hours before the assassination happened. We had a Zoom call, a friend of mine, him, a couple of his producers. It was a small call. We were literally talking, above all, about the anti-Israel questions that he expected to receive on this campus tour. And we were kind of talking him through talking points and strategy and how to deal with these expected hostile questions. And you held on my book, Israel and Civilization, Ali. What the last words I think Charlie spoke to me were, he literally said, Josh, when the Israel question comes up, I'm just going to plug your book, Israel and Civilization, because I think that what you read in the book basically is how I feel as well.
Something tells me that this was part of what Ben Shapiro was doing here as well. And part of why I believe that is because Bill Maher, at the very beginning of this interview, promoted Ben Shapiro's book.
All right, here we are. He's an author and a staff writer for The Atlantic, Tim Alberta, and he's the Daily Wire co-founder. His new book is called Lions and Scavengers, Ben Shapiro.
So it was almost as if Ben Shapiro got free promotion out of this, masquerading or pretending to be a lot closer to Charlie than he actually was in real life. But those are just my thoughts. Y'all up in the comment section, let me know what you all think. Am I looking too much into this interview? Do you see it differently now that we've had 3, 4, 5 months of investigation and time to clear our minds and the smoke is cleared? What's your perspective? Hop in the comment section and give me your thoughts, man. I'm Demetrius. I go by Didi. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.
Oh yeah, Didi got a podcast.